to know asks for an effort and asks for guts. Because you have to say, I don't believe you. And then most people feel then like accused and insulted. While I think that's the most important thing you can say as a scientist. I don't believe you, I'm going to check it myself.
Welcome to Called to Science, where we delve into the untold stories of the scientists pushing the boundaries of the life sciences. I'm your host, science journalist Brad Van Peerdon. Today, we talk about the importance of mentorship, creativity in science, and what science can teach us about being human. Welcome, Bart de Strooper. Many of us know of Alzheimer's disease, or in fact, know of someone who's been affected by Alzheimer's disease. You've been at the forefront of researching this condition for several decades. You were one of the first professors to join VIB in the 90s, and your work with Alzheimer's focuses on the basic mechanisms of the disease. In the 1990s, you made a groundbreaking discovery about the formation of amyloid plaques, which are characteristic in the brains of Alzheimer's patients. You've won many awards, indeed too many for me to list here. You've written a popular science book about the fight to cure Alzheimer's, and according to your colleagues at VIB, you are one of Belgium's most famous scientists. Welcome, Bart de Strooper, to Called to Science.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Are you aware of your reputation as one of Belgium's most famous scientists?
No? Well, once in a while nowadays, because people like you tell me, but I don't know. I also don't know what it means.
Okay. Well, your family, you have daughters.
Yeah.
What would they say to that title?
Yeah, they say, we are proud on you, Dad. But at home, I have a wife also, which puts me regularly with my feet on the ground.
Okay.
So, yeah, I also think I'm now in UK also. I think, what does it mean to be big scientist in Belgium? It's a village. It's so small. So I'm happy, of course, but I'm mainly happy to do good science and having contributed something. I'm proud on that. That's true.
So, as I understand it, you knew from a fairly young age that you wanted to be a professor, a researcher.
Well, I don't know whether I knew it. That's, if you look back, I think I had a phenotype which was going to that direction. But look, my parents had not been at university. Nobody in my family knew what science was. So I had it from cartoons and I mean, I liked it. I don't know. I played laboratory and I like Professor Barabbas in Suske en Wiske, which is one of these cartoons, which is in fact a boring figure, but I liked what he did. And so, but I've never gone to university with a plan or to school to become a professor. I thought it's far away. I don't know what it is. And then at university, I started to realize that these guys had laboratories, and I saw, of course, the kids of the professors, which have always a step in front. They went then to work in the summer in a laboratory, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. And so I asked one of these professors whether I could work in his laboratory, and he let me do so. So I played a bit, and I got a taste. But I was doing medicine, and I think one of the reasons why I took medicine was because that's a prestigious training, and if you come from I cannot say that, from an environment where studies are mainly oriented on a profession, then and I was a good student, so it was medicine or engineer, and engineer had an entrance exam, so I didn't like that, so I did medicine. But I've always felt that it was not the right thing for me. So I hesitated to physics after 3 years. I think if I would have been in another environment, I would probably have quit medicine and I would have done physics. And nowadays, now that I'm at the end of my career, I think that would have been really a bright move. Because at this moment, you see this fusion of informatics, data science, big data, biology becomes algorithms, and you want to model it with mathematical formulas, etc. So I mean, I think a combination of biology and mathematics or physics basically would have been a good choice at that time. But I mean, everybody thought I was crazy giving up medicine. And so it's only in the last year I was going for internal medicine, and Actually, I've worked a couple of months with Peter Karmeliet, who is 1 year older than me. He was doing cardiology, and I was also I was under his supervision for a couple of months. And so during that time, I felt like this is not what I want to do. I don't want to be in a hospital and having all these bosses above me. I want freedom, and so then I started to look around in Leuven in different laboratories, asking advice, etc. And so I came then with Herman van den Bergen, which is one of the founders of the VIB, very visionary, brilliant guy. And I said I want to do science. Actually, it's a little bit different. So Edward Karmeliet was a professor in Leuven, and he was a professor in physiology. That's the father of Peter Karmeliet. And I went to him. And he said, yeah, well, it's logical. I'm also done medicine. I've immediately gone into science, so do a PG, it's fine. And so he wrote a project for me, actually. And then a few weeks later, I had visited also other places because I had some friends who said, you should interview at different places. And so, and then I went to Van den Bergen, and he talked about genetics, which was at that time, 85, was still very small. Was some strange corner in the whole field. And he told me about that. I thought, this is fascinating. Mm-hmm. And so I went then to Edward Karmeliet. I said, I would prefer to do that other thing. I thought he would be angry, and he said, no, Bart, you have to do your own way. You have to go. He basically stimulated me to do that, and so I'm very grateful for that, because I didn't know how science was, but he taught me that a scientist has to do his own thing, and try to find his own way, and follow his nose. That's what I also say to my younger people. So I'm very grateful for that. So I was a bit lucky there.
I think it's interesting you say one of the things you said there, which is you wanted freedom. Yes. Which I think a lot of people, maybe outside of science, wouldn't consider scientists or research. They maybe think of it as this very strict discipline where you don't actually have that freedom. But it is quite a creative pursuit, no?
It is. I think science can only. That's the problem at the moment, that we get so much bureaucracy all over the place, and regulation and milestones. And good science is a creative job. You want to understand things which nobody has ever thought about. That's the good science. That's the best science. And so if you start to frame it, then you do things which are obvious. I mean, maybe not in most people's eyes, but in good scientists, things which you can predict are obvious. So yeah. So that's also what now I take full freedom. I don't do anything anymore, which is because I'm at the end of my career, so I can do that. And it's the most happy time of my life. And if there is one thing which I deplore, is that I didn't take even more risks during my career, and go for crazy ideas. So it's a very I think the only other profession which is related to us are artists, painters, whatever they do. They make also things which they like to do. They think about the world. But nice in science is the strict discipline, in that sense that the only thing which is accepted, because it's a discussion, it's a philosophy, it's thinking about the world, but you need to use factual arguments. And that's the difference with almost anything that people do, because most people work with feelings and with impressions and with and artists also, while science requests that you use your reasoning and that you come up with reasonable arguments, and that's a big difference.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is like you're playing in a creative way with your ideas, but the base of it is still factual information.
Yeah, but the thing is, that's exactly what I mean. It's not the facts you see. If you think physics is, people understand that now. I mean, looking in space or relative theory of relativity, or let's say when Crick and Watson identified DNA, and that's not facts like people think facts. This is carved out of the reality, and so it's a way of looking to reality, and creating new facts. But it needs to be facts. You need to prove that what you say is true, and that's different with humanities and other endeavors which are a little bit close to what we do, but. the exact scientists, the beta science, like they call it, is based on reproducible observations. That's basically the essence.
Mm-hmm. So, taking a step back, then, this is a creative pursuit. It's a philosophy, science. How does let's say your hobbies or the things that you enjoy outside of your work maybe influence that? As I understand it, you're into diving now.
Yeah, but I mean, I need to be careful what I'm saying, but science is my life. So that's my hobby, basically. And I do sometimes some things outside of it because, people think that you have to do that. But I mean, I read books. I like to go to the film, and I like classic music. I had a lot of interest when I was younger. I have still those, but I feel like I need so much time to get on top of all this exciting stuff which happens now in my field and in other fields. That there is. I use my hobbies are to do something else than outside of it once in a while.
To
disconnect.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
but it's not like that's fulfilling my life. That said, I love diving. It's fantastic. But I'm not a big. I learned it when I was 50. So it's like I learned skiing when I was 30, 36 or 37. I don't come out of family where this was done. So it's only by growing in the ranks of the society, if you dare to say that I started to be exposed to this. I learned also tennis at a certain moment. I've given up. Golf I don't do. That's a bridge too far.
Yeah, golf for me as well. How deep have you gone diving? Just out of curiosity.
50 meters is the It's a bit. I shouldn't say that officially because I have only a license for 40.
Okay, we can. So, getting back to research your career, you mentioned that a mentor kind of pushed you or to choose your own path. So you found genetics. How exactly did you come to work with Alzheimer's? Did you view it as a?
I mean, it's really a mix. So I did very basic research. Really, if I think what I missed there because of lack of environment, we were one of the first groups. Well, we were the first group in the world which had an antibody against integrins. They had even not a name at that time, and I think that was really the work of the mist. If I would have that type of observation now in my laboratory, we get a series of Nature papers, I'm sure. But anyhow, but then I struggled the 5 years of my PhD, and then at the end I felt like, I cannot compete with biologists or physicists or people who have had really an basic science training. I need to play along my medical training to remain competitive, because that's the only way to survive in our profession. You need to be productive, you need to find new things, etc. And so I decided I need to do something in medicine, and then the obvious thing is to do cancer. Even at that time, that's where most of the money is, so I started to ask around. I even didn't realize that I had to go abroad, because so I continued asking around. And then one of the professors who helped me during my thesis, he said, Bart, here in Alzheimer, that was beginning of the 90s, 92, there is a lot of proteases involved. You have this long precursor protein, and it must be cleaved, and that precursor protein is a protease inhibitor. So I'm thinking to switch to that field, but read a little bit about it. And if you want, I would like to recruit you as a postdoc. And so I read a bit about it, and I realized that in our course of neurology, Alzheimer's disease was 2 pages, was a backwater basically. And so at that time I got already the feeling of what good science was. So I said, this is an opportunity. And so I decided to work with Fred. And so that's actually how I jumped into Alzheimer's disease. So afterwards, nowadays I say I want to have a cure for Alzheimer's. I find it a terrible disorder, etc. But at that time it was really the opportunity to do something hardcore molecular biology with a professor which I thought was a really good scientist, and moving away from this insecure. I mean, I learned during these 5 years that the environment where you do your science is also important. So I thought this is a good chance. So that brought me into that field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting because I think, again, people on the outside might think, these researchers that have dedicated their lives to a condition like Alzheimer's or cancer or something like this, that they're driven, they must have started that with this idea, I'm going to go in and fix this problem and stuff, but rather it is a mix of opportunity and interest, exactly. Curiosity.
But I think the only thing in common with scientists is that you like to do science, that you like to do experiments, that you try to interpret them, and that you try to solve things which nobody understands, basically. Because I was with Alzheimer like that. There was a problem, a puzzle, which nobody had an idea where it started and where it ended. Everybody thinks it's dementia, but there the first indication were that there is a very clear molecular biology behind it, and so you want to understand that. And so if I had been in another place, I might have worked on another disease. I would have worked on a disease because of the motivation I had. Probably I would have ended in cancer like almost everybody at that time, and I'm happy I didn't, because this was much more new.
So it's time to dig a little bit deeper in this Dare to Ask. So I'm going to give you some questions that people would like to ask. These questions come from the VIB community. Mm-hmm. So, are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. As someone who inspires so many scientists, what advice would you give to researchers struggling to find their passion in science?
Well, I mean, I've also struggled a lot. So you need to follow your nose. You need not to give up too early. But also, I think there is a time of quitting. There is nothing wrong with having a scientific education and doing something else. So, I mean, it's your life. You live only once. There is no good or bad in jobs. It's mainly that you do it with full dedication. So you have to be critical for yourself. Is this what I want to do? Or do I want to do something differently? Because I think many scientists struggle also as young scientists with the question, is this what I really want? And I think the answer is individually dependent. But the lesson I have for my personal life is don't give up too early.
What's a mistake you made early in your time at VIB that ended up being a valuable learning experience? Is there just one, or?
Well, there are many, of course. I mean, that's a problem with life. It's an unbearable lightness of being. You can make a choice and you can never redo it. So basically, do you learn? I don't know. So I must say the VIB in general, I think it's a very positive experience. So my relationship with VIB is not fraught with bad feelings, etc. So the only, I mean, I would do, especially when I became director, I would do, with what I know now, some things politically different. But on the other hand, it's water under the bridge, and it's fine.
If you're listening to this Dare to Ask and you find yourself with a question you've never dared to ask, let us know in the comments. And who knows, maybe your question will end up on the next episode. You've kind of made the case publicly before that, cancer gets a lot of the attention and maybe the funding, whereas Alzheimer's not so much. What is your case for that?
First of all, it's just fact. I looked for the numbers. So because, I mean, at a certain moment you get always these nasty questions. You're working 10, 15 years and there's no cure and there's nothing happening. What is this for a field, etc. And then I start to think, it's in a certain way it's true. So, but I had always a feeling that there was a lot of lack of knowledge of the disease. And so I went to PubMed, which is the library of all the published journals in the world, and all the articles. And so you can then do searches. And so I searched cancer. At the moment, it's 5 million plus publications if you put cancer. If you put neurodegeneration, which is also a generic name, you find 350,000 publications. So that's about 15, 17 times less publications. And then I did the exercise, AIDS, for instance, because when I was a young medical doctor, I was in Paris, and I couldn't go into the operation room at a certain moment because I was in training, and there was the SIDA, AIDS. And so there was nothing known about that. And so now, 30 years later, there are quite some cures for it. And so I compared the rate of publications for le sida, AIDS, and for Alzheimer's. So Alzheimer's is a very slow linear curve, which started in 1907. Every 2-3 years a publication, the last years 5-10 papers. And with AIDS, you had 1983, I think, nothing before, or 1 or 2 articles. And then it jumped to 6,000-7,000 papers a year. And so when I did this exercise comparing different diseases and publications, AIDS had a double number of publications, but also the rate is very interesting because it's the area under the curve, which basically indicates how much a field knows. And so that told me that there is so much less activity. And then you look to clinical trials, it's the same, etc. And so my conclusion was we have 58 million people with dementia in the world, 56 with cancer. So it's an equal big medical problem. So I think that unfortunately it's a disease of the elderly, and it's taboo around. And so nobody has ever really taken it seriously. And in fact, it's true because now I see mainly in the United States, because I have written a couple of times letters to the European Commission, which for every framework program is stressing cancer and etc. And trying to convince them that neurological disease, and we have neurodegeneration, but we have also psychiatric disorders, etc. That's the big challenge, the last big challenge in medicine. So the United States have really taken the problem seriously, and they have quadrupled the investments over the last 5-6 years, and you see a lot of progress now, a lot of publication. And basically, in Europe, my whole career, we were really competitive. Most of the good ideas came from Europe, actually, probably because it was underfunded. But now we are just overwhelmed. It's a tsunami. And so that's why I'm thinking that Alzheimer is now in a real, dementia in general, but it's better to say neurodegeneration, is in a real tipping point. The first drugs for Alzheimer have now been approved, more or less. Not good drugs, but it's the beginning. I remember my times with AIDS, etc. So I think that I have a very good argument without having all the economic studies behind me, but just by observation that there is a problem of underfunding in this area.
Yeah, I think people probably don't realize how many people are affected by these conditions. But for those of us who have seen it in their lives, I've seen it in relatives in my life, it's an extremely personal disease.
Everybody has it. Has this experience, everybody. And one of the interesting things is that people age now much better, especially in the Western countries. They become 65 and are still healthy, and at 70 and 75. And they, from 75 on, it's really an epidemic. I mean, above 85, it's 1 in 3 who gets one or another form of dementia. And so these people in their 65, 70, they are still very operational, they can say. These people are starting to increase the pressure on governments, etc. They don't take it anymore. And that has been a driving force in cancer and in AIDS. Younger people, which were productive and had still a say in society, they really requested something to be done. And now we see that also with Alzheimer's. But everybody sees them. It's really, everybody has a story. And the disaster is that there's still a taboo. People don't like to talk about it. It's improving, but it's still a taboo. And then there is also that fatalism. It's something which comes with aging, which is just unfair. I mean, we are following together with Anna Holstee, a cohort of centenarians which have are mentally completely cognitive normal. We need to go beyond that.
So I wanted to ask, because again, like I said, those of us that have seen it personally, it's something that strikes at like the core of what a person is, their memories, their personality. Yeah. And so do you think about those kind of things? Maybe let's put it in a positive spin. Does your work with this disease give you a different understanding of what it is that makes us human? These synapses that are in our brain that build our personality and our memories.
Made me even more molecular and deterministic in a certain way than I was before. I mean, it's a machine. Your brain is a machine. It's a beautiful, fantastic computer. When I talk in public, I try to capture that a bit by telling, look, your brain it's 100 billion neurons. Yeah, 100 billion, what is it? Well, there are 10 billion people in the world. So there is 10 times more neurons in each of you active at this moment. So imagine every person in the world has a personal computer, and you link that up. That's 10 times the World Web at this moment. And you know what the capacity is of the World Wide Web. So everybody of you has a World Wide Web with artificial intelligence in your brain. And so just to illustrate that, we always think brain is reading or all these things. At this moment we are talking. You are sitting straight. That's entirely controlled by your brain, because if you become unconscious, you just drop flat. I'm moving my mouth, I'm moving the air here, pressure waves, they reach your ear. Your ears puts that in meaning, sends it to the brain. Meaning you know that I'm saying words, that these air pressures are words, but you need to interpret these words. You need to, in the meantime, you're looking to me, you have a smile, you are interpreting the words. You are thinking about, well, I need to stop him at a certain moment because he continues talking. I mean, there's all these levels. You are breathing, your heart rhythm is followed. You interpret these wordings in a certain emotional context. And so that's all happening in parallel. So that's not deterministic anymore, but it's still all material. And I think that people start to accept that because they see computers, and if you don't talk with this ChatGPT machine and you get answers, you start to understand that there are algorithms and there are mechanistic things which make this fantastic human beings possible, but it's still mechanistic. And so Alzheimer's disease is basically, if you want to put it very simply, it's a computer where one after the other the connections are broken, and for a long time your brain can work with it. Just like in a computer, you can have some things broken and it can still work rather good for most of the things. But at a certain moment you get a collapse, and that's dementia. Mm-hmm. And so the other thing I need to say about that is I'm not interested in dementia. So I think that's too late. I'm interested in what happens before. What starts to make that your brain has this, in Alzheimer's case, amyloid accumulations. How does that affect the brain? What are the first signs of Alzheimer's disease? Because now, when I was trained as a medical doctor, it was like, if people complain that they forgot where their keys were, that's not a problem, that's normal aging. And so it was all minimized, that's all that taboo. I'm interested to know, when does your brain function starts to be functionally affected by the biochemistry and the cell biology. And that are the signs which are interesting. And they are probably much less, they're probably transient. They are very difficult to discriminate from normal aging because we all go a little bit backwards, our functions go down. But I think we should look at that. Like we look to blood in your stool. You can say, it's nothing, it's blah, blah, blah. But nowadays we go for further investigation. And I think we need to come in a society where people are aware about their brain, and where if they feel worried, you should go to a doctor, a test, and you should have a simple test. I am thinking about, if I was a physicist or a computer guy, I would try to develop a maze where people can virtually walk in a space and try to find a way, because spatial memory is one of the things which are very sensitive. And so you could test on a person at 40 and you get a baseline, and at 45 and at 50. And really we should focus this whole interest in people around their 50s, where I think that the first signs of this biochemical process are starting.
Mm-hmm. This is just something that popped into my head, but there might be a moment to actually get the public on board with some of these things, because people do seem to have a lot of interest right now in optimizing their brain power. Yes. And there's lots of, maybe bad science and stuff about there, but,
yes.
but brain games, things like this.
It's a fascination. Musk put electrodes in a brain to move your arm. I mean, that's what I write to the European Commission. This is the last big frontier in biology and biological sciences. Understanding how the brain works and understanding the diseases which affect the brain.
Yeah, I kind of going back to one of my earlier ones there about the humanity of it all. Do you think that when if we figure it all out, that moment where we understand completely how the brain works and everything, like, does that strip our humanity away?
No.
And we're just,
this is just, but that's the problem, of course, as a scientist. My fascination for the world, I don't need a God. I mean, I'm so amazed every time I walk through nature, or even a city. If you look to a city and you start to understand the complexity, or you deal with people, I mean, it's I really hate that dualism. I'm really amazed that it still exists. That's also one of the things why I get very nervous when I go outside of my own world, because many people are still trying to say there is a soul and there is this and there is that, while the facts on their own are already so fascinating and so complex. I also don't think that we will ever really fully understand the brain. I think we will come closer and we will get more mechanistically inside. But how do you translate beauty? How do you love? I mean, yes, of course, you can dissect it very far, and it's probably some chemical reaction in your brain, but that doesn't change the value of love. I mean, it's just very interesting to know how it works, or to have an idea about how it works, because it's probably more complicated. I don't like that dualism. I don't think it's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I tend to agree with you, and I think that, like, there'll always be a mystery, and you can always find the joy in these things, even if you understand it deeply. If
you are a musician and you understand completely how such the music is built up, etc., I think you find it even better. Knowledge helps to appreciate. Yeah. It's like with wine also. I mean, you can just taste it, or you can know a lot about it, and it becomes even more interesting and nice.
Well, maybe this is just the scientists, the way we view it. I think a lot of people, there's some fear about these things as well.
Now you say the word fear. That's. I think, and we are now in a society which is cowardice. Fear and cowards hangs together, and fear means that you hide your head in the sand and you don't want to know. And fake news, etc., has all to do with that, because it's very difficult to know. To know asks for an effort and asks for guts, because you have to say, I don't believe you. And then most people feel then like accused and insulted. While I think that's the most important thing you can say as a scientist. I don't believe you, I'm going to check it myself.
Absolutely.
And fear makes you not doing that.
Mm-hmm. So one last one, wrapping up.
Yep.
You're nearing the end of your career, or closer to the end than you are the beginning, let's say.
That's very friendly.
Looking back at your career, the twists and turns, sort of following the opportunities, everything that you've experienced as a career scientist, yes. Key lessons. What are some things that you would give to the next?
Never listen to the others. Do what you think you have to do, yeah. And don't make compromises. I've made, you have to in life, but don't do that as a default.
All right, then before we finish, one final question I'd like to ask you, and it's something that we ask all of the guests here. Mm-hmm. If you were to encounter an omniscient being and could ask one question, what would that question be?
I don't know. I have no good answer for that. I'm surprised that Earth exists, and I mean, if you think about it, it's 10-kilometer layer around the Earth, and all these things happen, and then you have the complexity of the cosmos, and you have the complexity of this biology sphere, and so how can we understand the complexity from the cosmos to this molecular quantum physics stuff? Can you explain me? But I mean, it's of course a ridiculous question.
Not really. Makes sense.
But it's probably the drive that you are amazed about everything.
Thank you very much, Bart.
You're welcome.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. The same.
If you'd like to hear more inspiring stories from our VIB scientists, be sure to subscribe to this podcast. And if you like this episode, leave us a like or positive review. It really helps. Thanks for listening to Called to Science.